What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Wildcat Wire. I'm Jake Janisak, and I'm here with Nate Thomas. And today we're going to talk about Creighton's basketball season so far in Nebraska and just kind of look at the rest of the country.
Yeah, well, just a little college basketball preview-ish. You know, both Creighton and Nebraska have already played 2 games. They've won both of them so far. So we're a little late, but, I think we're only 2 games into the season. This is not a terrible time to do this.
No, it's not a terrible time. We kind of waited a bit. We kind of were able to see how these teams play. So far, Nebraska, they play 2 of the worst teams in college basketball, but they have really put their teeth in. But Creighton, on the other hand, they've kind of had a struggling start to the season, I would say, against some of these mid-major teams.
Yeah, Creighton's played against Western Illinois and East Tennessee State. East Tennessee State's not a bad team. And I know you're going to say, well, they're still from whatever conference. They're still, not a great team. But, this is a team that won 25 games a year ago. They almost beat Florida in the tournament last year. So, I wasn't, getting too over, if they lost, because that's not a bad team, and I knew it would be a tough game going into it. Otherwise, Nebraska's just taking care of business. I know you said they haven't been great teams. We just looked at the strength of record a minute ago. It was 321st out of 347. So, but they put up strong showings. They won by almost 70 against Missouri Valley State, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Or Mississippi Valley State. And then Southeast Louisiana was their other one by about 50 points. So, Nebraska's kind of lived up to their expectations. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But, let's kind of start with Creighton. First thing I want to talk about is that scoring in the offense. You lose so much of that production from the offensive end, losing in Marcus Foster and Kyrie Thomas. What has kind of been, your take so far with them averaging 77 points a game now?
Well, it just kind of seems like a different kind of Creighton basketball. We're used to seeing up and flying down the floor, high scoring. Losing Marcus Foster and Kyrie Thomas is a really big hit to this team. But they're finding ways to win. It was a very tough game. I think they were down by 14 against East Tennessee State.
I think it's pretty close to double figures at one point.
Yeah, and they were able to fight back. Sometimes you're going to need that for later in the season. This Creighton team, they're very talented. They're just kind of young. This is kind of a Creighton team that we had a few years back when Doug McDermott, Grant Gibbs kind of left. It would be more of a team that would be able to compete really well, in the Missouri Valley Conference kind of. But, this team might just not be ready for the Big East just yet, but they just got to develop. So I definitely took a lot. They still have a lot of good players. You got Tyshawn Alexander. He could be a big player in a few years or have a good season this year. You got Mitch Ballack. He's always been pretty good. Let's talk about Damian Jefferson. He's really been a good transfer for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, Damian Jefferson coming in from either New Mexico or New Mexico State. But he sat out a year ago after playing 1 year down there. And, he was kind of a player this could be a guy a role player type thing. Nobody really knew a lot about him. He didn't play a lot of minutes. He was a bench player. I believe he only started 1 game, but he played in all 30-something. But, he was just kind of that guy. He came in, and he just plays with a lot of energy. He had 11 or 12 rebounds in that first game against Western Illinois, and that's the most that we've seen by a Creighton debut. A debut from a Creighton player ever. He's been just that energy guy that is able to kind of push the defense a little bit, kind of that lead by example type player that you saw in Marcus Foster or Kyrie Thomas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see a lot of Damian Jefferson, comparing to Marcus Foster. Marcus Foster. They have a lot of, similarities, which is kind of the way they play, and I think he can end up being a pretty good player for the Blue Jays. Martin Crumple, he tore his ACL last year, kind of coming back into it. He has been playing pretty well. He's kind of adding the three-point shot to his game. But I can still kind of tell maybe it's been his 3rd ACL tear.
Yes.
I think it could be affecting him a little bit, it seems like.
And, I told you if he comes back and plays at the beginning of the year, he's not going to look the same as he was last year. He was such a crucial. I think he wasn't the best player on that team a year ago, but he was the most crucial. Yeah. They needed him to pretty much average and get a double-double every game if they want to have a chance at winning. And once he went down, the season just took a turn. But, I mean, this year, I just knew he wasn't going to be as effective. You know, this is the third knee surgery he's had. He had one, and this was the second and the other, so both of his knees are not the greatest. But, I mean, we'll have to see. He's just kind of still finding his footing here. He's got 10 points and 4.5 rebounds so far in the 2 games. So, we'll see how it goes for him, but I think he can still be a really good player for this team this year. But I just want to touch up on one last thing here on the offense. Tyson Alexander's emergence. I mean, we knew that he was going to be a good player, you know, coming from Oak Hill Academy, being a pretty solid recruit. And he wasn't quite the same player a year ago, but he didn't have the play time. He was kind of stuck behind, you know, Davion Mintz and Marcus Foster, Kyrie. And this year, now that he has the ability to kind of have the ball in his hands, do what he wants with it, it's really shown with him as a player.
Yeah, Tyshawn has really stepped up, I would say. You know, he's averaging 16 points per game, which is huge. He's already plugged in 69 minutes this season, you know. He's really been a stud for this Creighton team, and he's one of the reasons that I feel like they were able to get some games done. I kind of want to talk about Marcus Zegarowski. He really was able to step up in that East Tennessee State game. He didn't have the best game against Western Illinois, but I think he played well in that second game.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Zegarowski was a nice recruit that they had come in this year, only a freshman. And, I mean, everyone, you think when you have a player at Creighton, you think, oh, they're going to be a shooter, they're a decent ball handler, but they're going to play fast, they're going to shoot the ball well. But Zegarowski has come in, and I think he's run the offense pretty well from a point guard position. He's not the typical kind of best shooter type player that you would think.
Yeah, he's not like really the best shooter, but pretty good defensively. And honestly, if I'm going to take something from this Creighton team, this is one of the better, for me personally, I feel like this is one of the better defensively teams that I've seen. Like, they've been able to actually play some pretty good defense, unlike some Creighton teams that they've kind of let the score run up, I feel, a bit. But I feel they've actually played some pretty good defense.
Yeah, I mean, the type of play style is we'll give up points, but we're going to outscore you. But, I mean, I think the tide has kind of shifted with this team so far this season. And I believe they're holding opponents to about, 68 points a game or somewhere around there. So, I mean, it's not a bad team. I think Creighton just needs a bit more work. And, yeah, 68 points a game is what they're allowing. So, defensively, I think they're a lot better. But, I mean, it's not quite where they want to be. This is a really young team. There's only 2 seniors on it. And Connor Cashaw and Caleb Joseph is the second. So, I mean, I don't know if this is quite their year yet, but I really think that they can still make a pretty strong push in the Big East if they start getting things going.
Yeah, I want to kind of preview this game that's going to be coming up, a very big game. The Ohio State Buckeyes are taking a visit to the CHI Health Center to take on the Blue Jays. And this is going to be a really good game. We'll really get to see where Creighton's at.
Yeah, I mean, you get the chance to see how far they have come so far in these 2 games. Everyone knew it was going to be a tough season. They were predicted to finish 9th in the Big East. So, I mean, you bring in a quality opponent in Ohio State. I know they're not as strong as they have been in the past few years, but this is still a good chance to see how far they have developed in these 2 games in the offseason and what their ceiling is.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough matchup. You know, C.J. Jackson for the Ohio State Buckeyes, he's played really well. Ohio State did lose a lot from last season where we saw them get a pretty good high seed into the tournament. But, yeah, this is definitely going to be a test against them, kind of this young squad, see how they can do. I mean, looks like they're favored because, ESPN's got them 57-42, but we don't really get to know till till the game happens. But it should be definitely a good test.
I mean, just going to wrap up here with Creighton. Where do you see them finishing and at the end of the season?
Well, I definitely think this Creighton team is just going to keep getting better in the season. I think that they're just young right now. They're kind of getting into it. They definitely have some kinks. For example, they really struggle with turnovers, kind of undisciplined a little bit, it feels like. But I think that they're going to be able to work through it. Greg McDermott, he's always been able just to get back. When Doug McDermott, Grant Gibbs, Ethan Raggi, when they left, we didn't know where we're going to be at. They struggled that next year. That next season after that, they went to the NIT. So Greg McDermott, he's a good recruiter. He's a good coach, and I think he'll find a way to get this done. And I think Creighton, I don't think they're going to make the NCAA tournament this year, but I definitely think they're an NIT-capable type of team.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be close to see if they get into the NIT, but, maybe they decide to go the pay-to-play tournament type route and maybe play in one of those and put in a strong showing there. But I don't know if the postseason is quite the huge expectation for this year. Like we said, they're a young team. They've got a lot of things to work out. The Big East is a really tough conference this year. They could be the best in college basketball if people perform where they're supposed to be or how everyone thinks they will. So we're just going to wrap up with the Blue Jays and move on to the team from Lincoln in Nebraska. And, I mean, like we've already said, they've won their first 2 games so far this year. We haven't quite been able to watch it just because television rights are hard to get sometimes. But, I mean, their first 2 games have been kind of blowout type things.
Yeah, it's definitely been a blowout so far. They haven't really played the best teams. Playing Southeast Louisiana, Mississippi Valley State, not the best teams that you would play, but they've been able to get it done. Nebraska, they have a lot of expectations coming in this season. They're ranked 25th in the coaches poll, got some votes in the AP poll, and they're definitely a look-forward team. You got players like James Palmer Jr., Isaac Copeland coming back. James Palmer, he's averaging about 17 points a game right now. He's definitely going to be big. Glenn Watson, he struggled a bit, but he's been able to start the season pretty well. And then you also got Isaiah Roby, a young, talented player who's coming in. Everyone's kind of looking at him. And just the one thing that I would say that's kind of downfall is their bench just isn't really as strong this year.
I mean, I think you look at this Nebraska team, like you said, it has a lot of talent. And it's a very experienced team. Copeland, Watson, and Palmer are all seniors. They all came back for this year. I know Palmer and Copeland declared for the draft and signed with an agent, ended up coming back. So this team has very high expectations, and I think it should be really close to see how they perform with them. But just talking about this big 3 here, James Palmer can easily win the Big Ten Player of the Year this year, or finish second. I know one of the Edwards from Purdue is one of the best players in the country, so I don't know how Palmer will be able to match up with that. But, I mean, the starting lineup has been strong so far in the first 2 games. Like you said, the bench production hasn't quite been there, but I think once they kind of start to figure out their roles here, they kind of get into the feeling of we don't have to play 20 minutes a game. You come and give a good 10 minutes off the bench, put up a couple of points that can really help the team down the stretch of games.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch base. So pretty much, Nebraska, they pretty much got a big 4 this year. You got, like I said, Isaiah Roby, Glenn Watson, James Palmer, and Isaac Copeland, and they're really going to be a team that's really looked at. They got a lot of talent, but one downfall of this team is they don't really have a lot of size. Something that's really not been there for Nebraska. They had a 6'11" center in Jordy Chimanga, who ultimately transferred last season. And this year, their tallest player is a 6'11" player, Brady Hyman from Springfield. And he's still a true freshman. He doesn't really have a lot of meat on his bones. He's pretty small, but he's someone that could maybe they would need to use in some situations with It just feels like that basketball in general is just becoming players are just becoming taller and taller.
Yeah, I mean, it's taller and taller, but it's also a lot of teams are going smaller, speedier, someone who can run the court, more athletic, and shoot the ball. And I mean, that's kind of a player you see with Isaiah Roby. He has long arms. He's not the tallest player, but someone that can run the court, be athletic, make good plays on the perimeter on defense and offensively. That's kind of the players that you're seeing with Creighton that they've had with, Martin Krompel, some others in the past. So, I mean, that's just where I think college basketball is more moving down that route. But you look at someone like Bol at Oregon, who's 7'2", but is able to kind of run the floor and play the post. So I think Nebraska's, like you said, the biggest weakness might be their length. You match up against a team like Purdue, who always has someone that feels like 20,000 feet tall and can defend everything inside the paint. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up against a team that might be taller than them. But I think my biggest concern for them is the bench play, but also the three-point shooting. Tim Miles hasn't had great three-point shooting teams over the past few years. You think back to last year, outside of Watson and Palmer, who else really shot the ball great from deep? And I think Nana Kenton has done well with that so far this year. But, I mean, that might be something that they have to develop or something that they have to adjust to is getting more inside type things, getting more mid-range jumpers, not having all these 30-foot shots.
Yeah. So I'm kind of looking at some stats right here, Right now, I mean, this doesn't really say a lot for the teams they played that Nebraska's got the number one defense, but I definitely think Nebraska does look good defensively, and I think that could become really big in the Big Ten, where that's really a lot of teams' best aspects of them is their defense. So I mean, they played bad teams, but they still have the number one defense, and their offense hasn't played bad either, just being able to score. I want to kind of go to the game that's coming up, kind of like we went with through Creighton, Ohio State. Nebraska's got a game against Seton Hall, and this is a team, Seton Hall, who definitely has lost a lot. It could be a struggle this season, but it's really going to be a tough test for the Cornhuskers.
And I mean, I think the biggest thing with this game is Nebraska has it at home at Pinnacle Bank Arena that always shows up for a lot. And so, I mean, I think Miles Powell is a really good player, and we saw it a lot last season with this Seton Hall team. But they're going to have a tough task against a pretty good Nebraska team and a really hostile Pinnacle Bank Arena environment. Just finishing up here with Nebraska, overall expectations, they're looking for the tournament. They're looking for a high seed, and this team has, in history, not won a tournament game yet. Is the curse finally going to break this year?
Well, it's definitely a tough curse. I think in the preseason, Nebraska was third in the Big Ten, favorited. They were, they got a lot of high expectations. They don't have a favorable schedule, but I do think they can get some teams. And honestly, I think it's going to be kind of like a Cubs moment when they finally win the World Series. I think Nebraska's going to do pretty well through the Big Ten, finally get to the tournament first time since 2014, and finally just get that win.
I think depending on who they get the matchup against, it might be a tough first-round game. But, I mean, I think they should at least win one tournament game.
Yeah, I think that if they can do well this season, I think I was looking at some because they already have, the early tournaments and stuff.
The way too early rankings. Stuff like that.
Nebraska's been about, between, a 3 and 5 seed. So if they can if they can play really well this year, which I think they can, they have the capability of being a pretty high seed in the tournament, and get, a 3-14, 2-15, game like that, if they can, I think they can finally win a tournament game.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember seeing someone say this, I don't quite remember when, but it was always, it doesn't matter who you like or what seed you are, but you're always going to get the team that you match up worst against.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that might come in Nebraska's case. It might not, but I think the ultimate goal for this Nebraska team is probably should make it to the second weekend if they get kind of a favorable mini bracket there with the 4 teams in their pod, I guess if you want to say it like that.
Yeah, kind of switching it from Nebraska, we expect they're going to do pretty good. Let's kind of look at the rest of the country and a team that's, I wouldn't say come out of nowhere.
This is not a surprise. The Duke Blue Devils are not a surprise. They had the top 3 recruits of the 2018 class in R.J. Barrett, Zion Williamson, and Cam Reddish. Are we actually surprised that this team has been as well as they have?
I'm not really shocked, but, not a lot of people expected them to do what they did that first game, going against Kentucky. Kentucky, they always have high expectations. They're always looked at to be a really good team.
It's a John Calipari team.
Yeah, and they went in there and just ran them out of the arena, winning 118-84. That's hard to do against any college team, being able to run up the score like that. This is I remember seeing some people say, this is like an NBA-capable team in the NCAA, just the way they played. But, Nate, you kind of have some doubts about Duke.
I think it starts with Zion Williamson. And is he going to be able to consistently put up 25 points a game? If he was in the NBA right now, he'd be the second heaviest player. And he's only 6'7" at 280 pounds. I don't know if he can continuously take a beating like he does. He doesn't shoot the ball that great. And I don't know if he can run the post against, 7-foot guys like a Marvin Bagley or Wendell Carter did. And so I just don't know if he can physically match up a lot of these games. And if he's taking the poundings like he has, I don't quite think that his knees will be able to kind of hold up all the way through the season.
Yeah, I can see that. After their huge win, they played an Army team that probably won't be very good, and I saw with about 10 minutes to play, they're only up by 6. Yeah, they end up winning by 22, but,
Army's not a terrible team.
Yeah, Army's not horrible, but, they kind of gave Duke all they could get, and not even really Kentucky could do that. So, we can say it looks like Duke is definitely unanimously probably the best team in the nation right now. But who knows? Maybe Kentucky just isn't that great this year.
And also the thing is, R.J. Barrett put up 33 points against Kentucky. How often are you going to see someone put up 33 points in a game? So I just don't quite know. I think this was just I'm not going to say a one-time thing because this is still a really great team. But R.J. Barrett had 23 points against Army, shooting 3 of 9 from 3 and 9 of 19 from the field. That's the kind of thing that you're going to see with someone who shoots the ball a lot. So I don't know if they're quite going to put up all the points like they do, but I think we'll definitely see this kind of flatten out and kind of be the number one type of team that we've seen in college basketball over the past few years. Kansas is still a really good team. So we'll see how it goes for them, but I think they're not going to stand out as much when you get down the stretch. They start playing teams like your North Carolinas, your Virginias when you get into ACC play.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But, last year, college basketball was kind of a weird season. There was really no number one team that we looked at. It was very competitive, I would say, last year in the NCAAs. And this year, it kind of seems different. It seems that there is definitely teams that are a lot ahead of others, unlike last year where everyone was competitive. So, kind of looking at the tournament here, who do you think is going to be able to get it done here and get the national championship, Nate?
It's November, and we got all the way till April, and we know the madness that happens in March. But I can't go with Duke because last year, who was the number one overall seed, and who did they lose to in the first round? UMBC was the first 16 seed to ever win against the number one, so you can't pencil in a team like right in stone that number one team is going to win the national championship. And I mean, we even saw Loyola Chicago make it to the Final Four. We saw Michigan make it to the Final Four. So anything happens in March, I don't think this Duke Blue Devils team will, but I think the Kansas Jayhawks have a really good shot at it. You know, they have Dedrick Lawson. They still have some other really good players on that team, and they have some really good depth behind it. So, I mean, if you want a favorite right now, I think it has to be Kansas.
Me personally, Kansas is definitely a team that's always up there, pretty good. But I think I'm going to have to give it to Duke. I just feel that Duke is just too good of a team. One downfall is that they do have 3 freshmen, and going into the tournament, they never had to experience something like the NCAA tournament before. And what goes on in March stays in March. It's just a much different kind of season. March Madness is so much different from the regular season that you just really don't know what to expect. So really, it could be anyone.
Yeah, we're gonna kind of start to move here, wrap it up a little bit. One last thing we want to throw in here: the college basketball investigation. This is, I think, something serious that everyone has to say, this is a thing that's happening. And it's happening a lot more than people think. Justin Patton was just brought up in this. Multiple players, Silvio De Sosa, who would have thought that he would have been receiving $50,000 payments to go to Kansas. But, I mean, I think it's something really serious that's happening with the NCAA, and they're trying to get it right. I don't know how they will, but they're going to try and find a way to make this.
Yeah, this investigation that they're doing about pretty much like players getting paid and stuff has really plagued college basketball, and I know they're trying their best to fix it, but it's just kind of unfortunate that we've had to see a problem like this happen, and it's been really huge for the game.
And it's not something that's just happened over the past few years, but this is something that's probably been going on that we've seen for a decade now, 10, 12 years. And it's just something that happens when you have the amount of money poured into agents and sponsorship deals with different endorsements and everything like that. And these schools now have giant buckets of revenue that they're able to kind of say, oh, here, DeAndre Ayton, we have a bucket load of cash for you if you want to come to our school. Or if you're Creighton, and supposedly offering Brian Bowen $100,000 and then giving his parents 2 jobs working for the university that makes 6 figures. So I think it's the type of thing where we don't really know what's the truth. We don't know what's fake, but I think you can definitely say there's a legitimate problem going around and there's some type of money involved.
Yeah, there's definitely money involved. Honestly, I feel that shady stuff probably happens at every program.
Yeah, it's not happening with the 10, 12 programs that are mentioned into this. It's happening everywhere. And I think we just kind of have to accept the fact that this has happened, and how is the NCAA going to now enforce amateurism upon all these teams after a huge problem like this?
Yeah, it definitely was a huge problem. But other than that, despite the investigation, I think there's a lot to look forward to this year, Nate. And
it's going to be It's going to be a great year.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's going to do it for us here at the Wildcat Wire. I'm Jake Janasek.
And I'm Nate Thomas, and we'll catch you guys next time.